Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind, these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are headed into the week of September 26th. We are long overdue for a stock update video. And so I thought I'd hop in and talk about SPY, QQQ, IWM, and UUP, and kind of get some levels. And so I've cleared the decks, I've cleared the charts totally, and I'll put these in from scratch. So this is the daily on SPY, and first thing that sort of stands out to me is this downtrend resistance that I'd put in here that has top ticked these, so I guess these three, but really these two most recent pushes upward and has rejected it and tossed it back down. Now, if we put in some levels of previous support and resistance here, obviously this level stands out to me, this 360 level. You see not only here, but also levels back here that caught it. Now, the one thing to the upside that I would look at, and I don't know that this will happen quickly, there's actually a couple of things. So there's a couple of interesting gaps up. This is the one that was left after Friday. I'm actually recording this on Friday, but posting it on Sunday. So there's this one here, which could come into play. We'll have to see on Monday or just in the future period. And then there's this one up here as well that would push us up toward or into the low 400s again. So interesting gaps there. There's also a very small one here, but while we're here noting, we might as well note it. So this gap here as well could get us to push up toward 420 again, maybe in the future. So we'll see. I'll extend those out as we sort of get further down the line and may need to extend these into the further timeline. So if we look at some potential sticky points, if we do start to turn up, obviously that gap would be the first most important thing that I would look at. And then looking back here, a couple of levels that I would pinpoint right around here is a pretty good combination of previous support and resistance that's at least sort of caught relatively large movements up and down. It caught them and it wrestled with them a bit. So that 380 level I would certainly pay attention to. And then this level here, right around 389, you see catch resistance fell down, a bunch of activity there. And then back here as well, topped out, pulled through and then continued on quite strongly there. And then, there's a level here just shy of 400, as you would imagine, 397 or so. That will probably come into play before, if and when this gap becomes sort of a target, if you will. So those are levels to the upside that I look at, and then we're gonna have to certainly scroll left if we're gonna look for levels. Now I'm seeing a lot of folks sort of saying, we may see 300 before we see 400. Could be the case. So I'll sort of chart a bit of a map for myself down toward that level. I mean, there's kind of a level here, but it looks like it's probably stronger here because you see this level, then all of this activity, and then this catch here. So that's just getting darn close to that 300 level. And then what's this here? Is that okay? So that is about the 300 level. So you see this topping out here. It's kind of where this attempt settled and where this kind of pushed back and then was able to pull through. So those are sort of the important levels that I look for on the way down. Certainly this topping out as well, since we have a pretty big gap here. So 345, 325, 310, basically, these come through with the pennies on them, but the round numbers that I would say are important: 300, 310, 325, 345, 360, 380, and then 389, 390, and then about 397, leading up to any attempt at that 400 break, and then that puts this gap into play. So again, just zooming in so you can kind of see where these gaps sit on the daily chart. Now, if we hop over here, and if this is interesting to anyone, I can go through what this setup is in a future video. Leave me a comment if that could be interesting to you. But we've fallen out of the channel here. I'll zoom in a sec, but this is also on the daily. This is Thinkorswim, and this is the TTM squeeze. You see we're just firing at the moment, and sort of any attempt to kind of pull back on the downward pressure, it's getting pushed further in. Even this area here where we popped ourselves out of the channel up here, we were sitting at an RSI but overbought, and then have come down, and actually now as of Friday are sitting in oversold territory for the RSI. Now, does that necessarily mean anything? Not necessarily, of course. Just because something is oversold doesn't mean that it can't go lower. Same thing with overbought. But thinking about it, is at this pivot point, and you see it's settled right on that today. So it's certainly trying to respect this pivot point, and certainly wrestling with it at least. And it's out of the channel. And so what we typically see, I mean, you can look at to the upside as well, leaving the channel in either direction. The attempt then, the say gravitational pull, if you will, would be to bring that back down into this center blue line, if you can see that, and come back there. And then what happens is the next question. And here it obviously wrestled with it for a few days and then pushed down toward the bottom bound of the channel. And so as we see, here it left the channel to the downside as well, right? You see that down here, and then the gravitational pull was back up toward that middle range. So, we'll see if it does pull up. It would depend how long it took it to get there, but that puts it probably up into the, mid to high 380s, maybe 390. Just like I said, depending, because the more days that it stays down here, that's going to drag this down further. And so we would have to see. But that's, looking like it has the potential to try to pivot off of this pivot point, maybe draw itself back toward that center line, and then kind of make another decision from there. But, we'll see. But that's what that looks like. Now, if we go to, let me just pull it up here while we're here, QQQ, we'll come back to this. Pop over to QQQ on here, kind of similarly map out destinations, potential places of rest. That to be too sort of cryptic. So, tried to leave this downtrend relatively recently, say mid-August. And it did that thing that we see a lot of times when something tries to leave a strong downtrend. It pushes through, and you think, okay, maybe this is the break, right? And then it just comes down and kind of battles with staying on top of that as opposed to underneath it, and then just falls back through. And then here you see it recently reconfirmed on, looks like the 12th of September, and now it's pushed down quite a bit further. So that's what I would look like. That's what I would look to at that point. This 268 level, obviously, pretty important. And then if we look at some levels near in to the upside, obviously this level stands out to me, as does this level. Where would we put it? Right about here. Oh, then having this challenge with Webull where see, it did it again. I think I push it and it doesn't actually capture that I want to draw something. So this has a bunch of resistance levels that it's going to catch to the upside. It's probably stronger right around here. So I would say about 297, 305, 314. If it's able to get some mojo to the upside, certainly look like strong contenders for resistance to me, as well as right here. You see it got caught. See, support, support. So I would put one in here as well, just shy of say 280, which, you know, to the extent that there's a gap here as well that it's going to fill, that would about suffice for that. It's not the biggest gap, it's just about $2, maybe even less. But, you know, it's potentially there. So scrolling left, if we are going to go down further, you know, there's some levels on here. Oh, maybe I didn't delete all of my previous levels, but we have levels down here down to, you know, 268. The level right here as well, as you see. Ay, ay, ay. Come on, Weeble. My goodness. If anyone from Weeble is watching, I'm sure that's not the case. Your iOS desktop app has certainly some quirks. Wouldn't be the first time. This super strong level here at 235, you see, played an integral role in this big push, and then this pullback, it gave it the bounce, whereas a few months prior had given it a strong push off, right? So this huge move here, that's where it topped out and then came back through and readjusted itself, falling through quickly, pushing back through quickly the next day, and then reconfirming here, and then off to the races all the way up for an attempt at 300 at that point. So pretty important levels there. So that's where I'm going to map the Qs down to. Now, if we look over here, I know this is going to be a very long video, so sorry if you hate long videos. But similarly, we see it falling out of the channel. You know, we saw that happen previously here, and it took it quite a while to work itself back toward that midline, which we were talking about before. You know, we see a relatively similar move as to what we saw on SPY. Still firing here on the TTM squeeze, getting into oversold territory on the RSI right at the pivot point, right? So all of these things are just kind of part and parcel, or not even mirror images, because that would be the reverse, but carbon copy images of what we saw on SPY. So, you know, these two are sort of in tandem, at least at the moment, it looks like to me. Now, moving on to IWM, which can certainly be dragged around with its larger counterparts, SPY and QQQ, but also does some unique unto itself things. As we'll see previously, it was stuck in this range for quite some time, which was not really a thing that was happening with SPY and QQQ. Now, this downtrend here certainly looks a bit more similar to the Qs than it does to SPY. You know, another way, don't know if this one will really kind of play out in real life, because it would only have been formed once and never reconfirmed, but there's the potential for an inner and an outer downtrend for it to have to overcome. Now, similarly, you see the gaps in here, right? Gapperoni right there. It's not, we have some wick action in here that I'm covering up. It's a bit hard to see, but you know, you get the gist. Go to your own chart and make it for make it for yourself. And very similarly to SPY and the Qs, you have a leg down slightly further than where we finished today. And then if we do chart sum up, you know, there's not a lot going on, you know, unless it were to get into this gap and get itself back into the 170s. There's some resistance here right around 177.50 for sure. And then here, 183, looks like it will probably get sticky as well. Yeah, 182, 183, kind of depending on, you know, where it wants to settle in that range. This large gap here, you know, makes it a bit challenging to plot that course. But this is capturing most of these support and resistance levels. But these things are always, of course, in a bit of a zone, as I'm sure you know. Sometimes they get caught to the penny, but a lot of times it's a little bit. We do ourselves a better service to put in boxes like this, but it just gets so busy looking so fast that can be quite hard to deal with as well. So this 162 level, sitting previously here, it's interesting when you plot things and then kind of scroll left and see how, if you had just started by scrolling left, you would have captured them anyway. So level down there, just shy of 150, which might act much more like 150 is probably a strong psychological zone. That, of course, would depend on if IWM is like acting independently, or if it's just kind of getting dragged around, kind of tick for tick, or percent by percent with the Qs and with SPY being the much larger, seemingly more powerful indexes and ETFs. So this level here as well, this will be the last one I'll put in, right around 132, 133. Be a pretty significant drop from where we are at the moment. Now coming over here to IWM, you see similar but maybe slightly more to the downside. Sitting at this pivot, maybe it's carbon copy-ish. I mean, to me it looks like their moves are all a little bit slightly more exaggerated. That to the upside here, it was a bit further out of the channel to the upside. Did revert back to the mid-range, which we talked about, pushed down to the lower bound, reverted back to the mid-range, pushed down to the lower bound, and now has fallen out again at this pivot point. Does that mean it's going to come back toward the middle again? That's the question. That would put it, upper 170s, maybe 180 if it came up quickly. Also, in oversold territory per the RSI. But still firing on the TTM squeeze, as the others are as well. Now, UUP, we'll take a look. And if you're not familiar with UUP, it's the bullish dollar ETF, the US dollar, UUP. Oh, we got it right here. Sorry, forgot I had set this up actually. Yeah, so we see here Invesco, DB US dollar bullish one day. So just wanted to take a look at this. I'm not going to plot a bunch on here, but I mean, if you look at this daily, this is wild to show you how strong the dollar has been, right? And we zoom out here to the weekly. I mean, this shows it even better. And so that's, certainly playing a role here, I suspect, in how much of a struggle it has been for any of the indexes to hang on. There is, of course, other like huge macro forces, right? There's global conflict. It's a question. There's energy potentially crisis on the horizon that has folks worried, recession worries, inflation worries, and then of course quantitative tightening. Like all of these things certainly accumulating to this one end of drops in the market and what have you. But the strength of the dollar certainly playing a large role as well, I would presume. So something to keep an eye on. If that does continue to push higher and higher, the markets could find it more and more challenging. We see it's the highest that it's been on this chart, it looks like to me. So that's something to keep track of, or at least be aware of. To the extent to which this even matters. It's well out of its channel, well away from, being under this sort of downtrend level, and briefly triggered and is now fired well into the overbought territory. Again, not to say that this even matters as it pertains to UUP, but something to keep an eye on to the degree to which it respects these things. I mean, it's, got pretty far out of bounds here and reverted back and even stretched back down to the lower bound of the channel. And so, to the degree to which it has respected these bands some, there's that. One other thing I'd mention on SPY that I forgot I had actually looked at and then didn't add in here. If we pull in this 180 MA, it's right about there. It's very, very close. That's 358.88. So, $10 or so. So maybe that doesn't feel that close, but it is relatively close to that. And as we see, it did fall through here, but then quickly, just over the course of a few days, regained and then actually pushed significantly higher. But it respected it here. It respected it here. Scrolling back, it respected it here. Right, and then here it was in this downtrend. This was the 2008 crash, so we're on the weekly right now. But it respected it back here as it was pulling back, and there were definitely some more challenging times here. This is probably around 2001, and then 9/11 and all that jazz. But in recent years, say since 2011, it has really respected this. Bounced off, bounced off, bounced off. Lost it, but just for, I previously said a couple of days because I forgot we were on the weekly, but lost it for a couple of weeks, but then came screaming back and just pushed significantly higher than it had been before. That was, of course, the crash in 2020. And so now it's coming back to that point again. So the question is going to be, what's it going to do? And if it does slip through, is it going to look anything similar to this, or could it potentially look more like this, right? And fall quite a bit further when it slips through before recovering, and then even at that point kind of struggling to recover over several weeks. So that's something to certainly keep an eye on, in my opinion, or at least I will be keeping an eye on it. And so I hope you've been surviving this year well so far. It's definitely been a challenging one. I feel that as well. I took some downside protection toward the end of the day today, just because I've found myself at this point to be extended very long. And so it's hard to not have sort of throwbacks to this move when I felt like I got too bearish and didn't flip bullish quickly enough. And now feel like I'm trying to prevent myself from becoming too overly bearish, but then maybe I'm just sort of having these emotional or throwback reactions as opposed to just kind of playing what's in front of me and analyzing where I'm long, where I'm short, and kind of making sure that everything is positioned as best as I can figure it out to be, and go from there. All right, folks. Well, I hope that you have a good trading week ahead. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.